Hello and welcome to this round 6 of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica, and we have two absolute titans of the game. We have the #1 ranked player in the world right now, just missed out on making the trifecta of World Champion, Pro Tour Champion, and Player of the Year, but he had the consolation prize of making it into the Hall of Fame yesterday, Seth Manfield, and he's up against the winningest player ever to play on the Pro Tour. 7 Pro Tour wins already under his belt, and I'm sure that the member of Team Good Luck High Five would not mind picking up a few more. Let's head down to our feature match area to see Seth Manfield against Budde here for round 6 at the Pro Tour. Hello and welcome to this round 6 of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Eduardo Sedge-Gallic, and we are very excited to bring you what promises to be a fantastic match. In principle, we could probably spend the majority of this round just talking about the various achievement of our two players that we're going to be starting off with on camera, but we'll just rattle through the edited highlights. We have Seth Manfield, who he's already had a pretty busy weekend. He's already made the Hall of Fame this weekend. He did his speech about how he gets to now be one of the players that has the ring that's getting invited back to every Pro Tour. He's also won Pro Tours, he's won World Championships, he just missed out on Player of the Year yesterday, and he is on Selesnya mid-range, and he's up against Budde. 7 Pro Tour wins. Now, to put that into context, that is more wins than any other team in this competition has, and on Team Good Luck High Five, he is, well, he's ready to battle. He has brought along with him one of the consensus best decks in the field, Golgari mid-range. But right now, both of these players on 3 and 2, so they're going to have to piece something together. And there's at least one card in Seth Manfield's list that stands out that feels like it could be very good in this matchup indeed, Eduardo.
Yeah, looking at the Seth's list, 4 Tocatli Honor card, but not cast on turn 2. So coast is clear. Tocatli Honor Guard has started seeing main deck play just as a way to fight these Golgari main deck. Golgari mid-range creatures full of explore creatures, full of enter the battlefield triggers like Ravenous Chupacabra. But yeah, Seth with almost no play. The hand for Seth is a little slow. On the play, keepable though. 2 cards, Sign of Urza, and an Excellence Binding.
Now, on the other side of things, we have Druid of the Cowl that's come down for Budde. That not necessarily a card that we see in every Golgari mid-range list, but it does let this mid-range list transition into the late game a little bit more smoothly. He's got Ravenous Chupacabra ready to deal with most creatures. He's got Find Finality, and he can potentially cast Vivian Reed here a turn early as the first Planeswalker of the game comes down for Seth Manfield in the form of Karn, Scion of Urza.
Yeah, and this Karn is going to cause a lot of issues for Kai, since there's not really a clean answer available in Kai's hand. And one of the key patterns we're likely going to see is Kai going, well, I'm going to deploy my own Planeswalker. I have this Vivian Reed, going to plus, get something, but then Seth Manfield going to slam down the Excellence Binding on Vivian Reed. And Vivian Reed is one of the few answers to Excellence Binding in the first place. After that, there's not really anything in Kai's main deck, so apart from those 2 Thrashing Brontodons, and that's going to be one of the more key cards for Kai to draw at this point.
Yeah, I mean, one card that's seen a lot of conversation when it comes to Golgari midrange is the role of Assassin's Trophy. In principle, because it can deal with any type of permanent at instant speed for just 2 mana, very, very powerful, but it's not really lined up necessarily as the best answer in this format, and it looks like Kai, at least in terms of his main deck, choosing to eschew the powerful instant entirely.
Yeah, and Seth just taking up cards since the play this turn is to go for Excellence Binding, so better to get a card. This is a tough choice from Kai's side. Remember, Kai probably can choose here. This is tough because giving Vivian Reed if Seth doesn't have a land is fine, but Kai knows that there's a Llanowar Elves in hand, so it's not like giving Vivian Reed is great. But then Seth can decide to just go this turn Llanowar Elves plus History of Benalia. So there's not really a good option for Kai here. So yeah, gives the History of Benalia. Just goes, look, I can't deal with land Vivian Reed, so I'm just going to give you that. Likely we're going to see Seth though go Excellence Binding on Vivian Reed to shut down Kai of any card advantage, plus Llanowar Elves to put Seth forward.
Yeah, look at that. Exactly as you call it there, Eduardo. Ixalan's Binding, dealing with that Vivian Reed, and meaning that no more Vivian Reeds can come along, at least from Kai's side of the battlefield. If Seth wants to play copies of Vivian Reed, that works out just fine for him. And in principle, he can get them out from underneath Khan at some point.
Yeah, and all this exile removal really hurting Kai's draw of double finality. The irony of showing Vivian Reed. What would be a good card, but we're going to probably put this one in the bin.
Yeah, the Merfolk there. Getting a +1/+1 counter thanks to that Explore. But really at this point, Budde, without a strong set of attacks on the Planeswalkers, follows things up with Ravenous Chupacabra, at least to deal with that Lamoir Elves. And Seth Manfield here. I mean, this deck's a Selesnya deck, but mid-range, definitely the right term. I mean, we've seen very little from Seth that would suggest he's bothered about attacking his opponent's life total at all. He just wants to gradually gain complete control of this game.
Yeah, this is a Planeswalker list through and through. Free Vivian Reed, free Karn, just trying to get an edge here. So, but Kai knowing that an Honor Guard is a potential option with that minus, has to basically deploy the Chupacabra going, well, once Seth decides to either get this Honor Guard or play it from hand, as we see Seth's loaded hand here, able to deploy a great variety of different threats. But yeah, Seth Manfield's deck is really Llanowar Elves, Druid of the Cowl into Vivian Reed, Karn, Sign of Urza, and good cards like both green and white have to offer.
So Tocatli Honor Guard now in play. Creatures no longer have their enter the battlefield triggers happen, and there's a lot of those triggers in this green-black list. That's really the list that Tocatli Honor Guard is designed to most shut down. And while the creatures from Seth Manfield's side of things not individually all that imposing, they will get the job done gradually if Seth can lock down what's going on this battlefield.
Yeah.
Find Finality might have to get employed relatively soon here.
Yeah, but even with Find Finality, only Druid of the Cowl would survive, which is okay, but Budde's hand is just not lining up well against what Seth is deploying. Kai essentially has access to 2 removal spells and 2 Rafts against a deck that has a bunch of Planeswalker, a plan being, you know, I'm just going to put a bunch of Planeswalkers in play. Seth is just outmatching Kai in fundamental game plans. The way this game 1 lines up, Kai is just a dog in this matchup.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that need to go right in terms of Kai Budde's draw. He almost needs to have an unusual draw to be able to have a competitive game against this game 1 configuration that he finds himself up against here. I'm sure that when Seth was figuring out what he wanted to play at this Pro Tour, a big part of his reason to select this Selesnya mid-range list will have been exactly this matchup.
Yeah. Essentially, Seth decided to configure his deck to beat Golgari mid-range, and it looks like the Selesnya mid-range, game 1 for sure, is a good path to do so.
Cast down there used on a Knight token from History Benalia, and a second removal spell there dealing with the Tocatli Honor Guard, at least clearing a path so there can be some attacks on Khan. But Khan, with so much loyalty, it doesn't even finish the Planeswalker off here.
Yeah, the important part here of this, of clearing the board, isn't just putting Karn down to a lower loyalty. It's especially putting Karn to a point where minusing Karn to get Vivian Reed is not the best line for Seth. But we're probably going to see Seth here aim to plus Karn and start deploying board threats. Especially this land. If Kai gives Seth this land, then Seth can just play it, play a Carnage Tower and force Seth into a position. But wow, Kai deciding, you know what? I don't think I want you to have access to this mana, so I'm just going to give you this Tocatli Honor Guard just because it doesn't work against the cards I have. It is a good card against the Golgari mid-range deck in the absolute sense, but not at this stage of the game. So I really like Kai's heads-up play of not giving the mana to Seth.
Tocatli Honor Guard coming down here. The 1/3 body in and of itself, not overly exciting, but the ability has the potential to make life very, very fiddly for a lot of Golgari mid-range opponents.
Yeah, and Seth here, probably quite aware of the card Find Finality, knows and might decide to actually get rid of this Druid of the Cowl. That it could also be deciding to deploy a larger board, not worry too much about a Find Finality since it would just leave a free 5 Druid of the Cowl on Kai's side, deciding, you know what, if these creatures die, that's okay. Then I can just minus get a Vivian Reed.
Yeah, there's unfortunately, because the Find Finality will give -4/-4 to everything, even though Druid of the Cowl will survive it, it won't be able to then attack in and be able to finish off Khan here.
Yeah. And I mean, Kai doesn't even have the 6th land for it. I mean, that's we're talking about how it might be useful, but without that 6 mana, it's almost a dead card in hand. The Fine Portion, with all this exile removal, has no targets, and Kai has drawn the land here, so there's a good chance here Kai does deploy it since it's good enough against the board that Seth has deployed. There's a Knight token, the Druid, the Honor Guard, and the Llanowar Elf. So I think that Kai here, we're very likely to see this find finality, especially since it would kill Kai's own Chupacabra and Branchwalker. So the second find finality will become find after the first one is finality.
I mean, this one of the reasons that Druid of the Cowl getting the nod, presumably, in Kai Budde's deck is that it is another creature that you can play finality and have a creature that hangs around afterward.
The decks that play Druid of the Call are usually already playing 4 Llanowar Elves, and they're looking for additional sources of mana. But then when you're playing Druid of the Call, you're making it clear, I want to get to 4, 5, 6 mana. Whereas the versions with just Llanowar Elves try to stop, really want to accelerate to free. So if you see Druid of the Call, you know that your opponent is unlikely to have a card like Midnight Reaper, for example, since those 2 cards don't synergize so well together, and is more likely to go bigger down the line, maybe more Planeswalkers.
Well, this time around, there's no way that Kai can stop Seth getting up to his 6 mana off that activation of Karn. Karn has been consistently allowing Seth Manfield to draw additional cards since coming down on turn 4 here.
Yeah, and with Seth having access to 6 mana, can deploy a Carnage Tyrant, essentially take over the game. Worth thinking about, though, that another finality might come, so maybe going for an alternative line here.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of in a nice position if you're Seth here, where you can start just really thinking about what's the worst case scenario of the card that Kai could have, given that you have answers to a fair proportion of what's going on. Kai just with a single card left in hand here, so he's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, Kai looking at the graveyard like, yep, those are some good, that was some good stuff.
Yeah, and History of Benalia coming down now. I mean, Seth Manfield's deck, the card quality in his deck, very high indeed. Yes, it might not have as straightforwardly synergistic a plan as what's going on in the Golgari list, but hard to argue with the potency of what he's deploying.
Yeah, very much a threat, like an answer to this Golgari mid-range deck. Kai drawing the actual worst card in the deck in that third Vivian Reed, not castable under Excellence Binding, so Kai has to decide, do I want a finality here? Do I want to find, or do I want to just to be more patient and wait for a better spot for this finality?
You can see the relative stats of Seth and Kai coming up here. Kai making it into the Hall of Fame around the same sort of time that Seth was just picking up his first pro points a long while ago now. And Seth in his speech at the Hall of Fame dinner kind of referring to Kai and John as sort of the old guys in the room that he was hoping to be able to join as he becomes part of that rarefied institution, which obviously met a little roll of the eyes from 2 of the best players ever to pick up a Magic card.
Yeah, they start slapping each other on the shoulder, and then John Finkel's like, how old does he think we are? But
yeah, right now, though, for Seth Manfield, with a Carnage Tyrant on the battlefield, a History of Benalia reaching its final act, he's in great shape here. Kai going to have to do, again, something very substantial. And one of the reasons that Carnage Tyrant's so great is that the mass removal available to these Golgari mid-range decks, typically not good enough against the big dino.
yeah, I'm kind of interested here. Because Kai decided to not play the finality here. In the face of what... Well, to be fair, the Knights would only be 4 frees against the Druid of the Cull. But with this baffling end, this is going to end up being a lot of damage. And I think Seth is just going to take this one. Seth was very advantaged overall in this game anyways, but will likely take this one down.
Yeah, the matchups seem to favor Seth in game 1 at the very least, and that currently holding true. Kai on just a 4 points of life now, and there are plenty of threats on Seth's side of the battlefield. At this point, he decides to try and just close the door entirely, gets down a Vivian Reed.
Yeah, and I mean, Seth has no Hammerlock on this game. There's not really a card that the Golgari mid-range deck can play that would deal with this board state. So Kai's going to draw the card, and yeah.
So both of these lists are mid-range lists, Eduardo, but it looks to me like Seth's list is kind of a little bit slower, can go a little bit bigger, Is that the kind of decisive advantage in this matchup?
So in a matchup like this, like the mid-range mirror, you're looking essentially if you're trying to beat mid-range, you're trying to go a little bit bigger, right? And that's the position that Seth went for. So it means that like Seth decided I'm going to lose to Jeskai control, but I'm going to beat the mid-range mirror. And based on the metagame that we've seen, that seems like the right position to have taken for the tournament.
Well, we'll find out if that position changes any after sideboarding. We will be back for more of this epic matchup after these messages.
Up your game with Ultra Pro Magic the Gathering accessories. Find the best Magic art on card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and more. Visit ultrapro.com to learn more and find a retailer near you.
Hello and welcome back to this round 6 of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. You can see that one of our matches already complete in our feature match area, that between Yuki Ichikawa and Lucas Esper-Berto, but we are still just shaping things up for Game 2 here between our two Hall of Famers, Seth Manfield, who he's pretty much just walked through the doors of the Hall, but made an imposing entrance as he's won Game 1 in decisive fashion against Kai Budde, the 7-time Pro Tour winner. And we're going to sideboards now, and there's a few spicy ones in these sideboards that I'm kind of interested to see if they come in and quite what they do here. We have the likes of Doom Whisperer potentially for Kai if he just wants a big body. There's a Golgari Raiders that I'm very intrigued by. That, if you're looking for a surprising threat, it definitely qualifies. I can't imagine that Seth really needs to change very much, though, does he?
No, Seth doesn't really need much. There's like a Settle the Wreckage, Seal Away. Those, Baffling End, maybe. The Ajani Adversary of Tyrants, like Seth is adding maybe changing one or two cards. Seth's main deck is already designed to beat Golgari mid-range, so there wouldn't be a need to port in much, right? As a game plan, it's already so far favored. Kai will have to morph the deck a bit. Duress, not only a card I enjoy in mid-range mirrors, you want to have something that's good in a top deck war, but and also, Duress against a deck with Vivian Reed, that's not necessarily a spot you want to be in. But Seth has demonstrated Vivian Reed can't and Excellence Binding, it just may be a necessity on Kai's side.
And now we have of course, Kai with the option of being on the play or the draw. In these mid-range mirrors where games can go kind of long, is it just a straightforward obvious that you still want to go first?
Usually you do. It's because the advantage compounds. A Planeswalker is very hard to deal with. Seth can, and Kai can with Vraska's Contempt and Excellence Binding, but you usually want to go first since you can compound the advantage of a Planeswalker, if you get to untap with one, that means you've replaced the card, and then you're up one. So you still want to be on the play. It's because cards, Planeswalkers tend to kind of snowball over time.
All right, well, these players drawing their opening hands here. Hopefully we'll see these guys getting to play with a full 7. Kai has the early acceleration, but doesn't look to have too many lands in this opener.
Right, but that's the power of Llanowar and Merfolk Branchwalker. Not too many lands. That's okay. You have a lot of pressure potentially.
On the other side of things, it looks like there's at least one copy of History of Benalia available to Seth Manfield here. And we've talked about that card. I was almost feeling like Siege Rhino, not in terms of the immediate impact it has on the game, but if you draw 2 or 3 of them over the course of the game, it just can feel like a real hammer blow because they kind of synergize up very nicely.
Yeah, and History of Benalia may not seem like the best card in a matchup like this, since Seth is just looking to out mid-range Kai. But on the draw, it's a really great card. It offers multiple bodies. It means that Kai can't go for too aggressive a game plan, so it blanks a little bit the Branchwalkers from dealing incidental damage, and it protects your Planeswalkers in the long game.
And how do we feel about 3 copies of History of Benalia?
Well, I would feel pretty great about them if Seth was on the play. On the draw, it means that Seth might fall too far behind and start trading them, but they're still good. They still generate a bunch of 2/2 bodies, which are good against what Kai is offering here.
And there has to be a baffling end here from Seth Manfield because the double Llanowar Elves start from Kai Budde means that he was threatening quite a bit on his 3rd turn on the play. As things stand, Kai already with a couple of bodies on the board even after that baffling end. He's got Llanowar Elves, he's got Merfolk Branchwalker, and I think that he's likely to have another Branchwalker here to potentially help him find another land here. Or indeed, you know, why not some more Llanowar Elves?
Yeah. This Llanowar Elves, though, is going to hit the bin. It would be a land would have been good for Kai here, but the Llanowar Elves not so great since it means that Kai would have drawn another turn without a land. And with access to Thrashing Brontodon in play, Kai still has an option for next turn.
So Seth does have the planes that he needs to be able to start playing copies of History of Benalia, generating night tokens.
Yeah, it's just going to be night, night, night.
Night for Kai Budde potentially here as these enchantments stack up.
Yeah, and the Knights work very well against this Branchwalker plan. Kai drawing another Branchwalker.
I like these attacks from Kai. I mean, just even though trading off against individual Knights is not ideal, you really don't want there to be too many Knights in play once History of Benalia hits its 3rd act.
Right, and Kai doesn't actually know about the other 2 histories, so Kai's just going, well, I kind of have to push through this anyways. I have a Vivian Reed in hand that might have an impact, and that's why you see Kai playing Branchwalker over Brontodon, just because while Brontodon would be a better body, it essentially doesn't help with Kai's mana situation. Missing the land drops here is giving Seth a chance to take a hold on this game. And that's what Seth would have been worried about with this hand, is just Kai going land, something like Vivian Reed and taking over. But with Kai missing land drops, Seth is going to be able to take over this game.
Yeah, typically speaking, Vraska's Contempt, a fairly premium card for Budde in this matchup, but he had to send it to the bin just because he cannot afford to be missing land drops for too many more turns here as another copy of History of Benalia comes down.
Yeah, and with the 3rd copy, that's going to be a lot of bodies from Seth. And Seth's going to be able to deal damage kind of incidentally, not even needing to put too much work. But it seems like Kai drew a card that might help him in this situation. It looks like Jadelight Ranger, which is going to at least get Kai much closer to that needed 4th and 5th mana source. But with these Knights in play, Seth may decide to only trade 1 here in order to be able to attack for 4. And having 2 more Knights. Seth may also decide to block both Merfolk Branchwalkers here.
Yeah, he's in the luxurious position of all of the lines available to him, either taking all the damage, doing all the blocking. Don't leave him in a terrible position because, quite frankly, against what Kai's got going on, he doesn't need to do too terribly much here. Jadelight Ranger, though, finds first 1 land, then a Carnage Tyrant on top. The Carnage Tyrant will be a little bit of a question mark for Kai.
Yeah, I think Kai is just going to ship that to the bin. The 4 is a welcome sight for Kai, but yeah, Seth deciding to take the damage, understanding that the Golgari mid-range deck doesn't really have reach. It doesn't even have a flying creature. So at that point, Seth's Knights, especially with this other history in his hand, are going to start dealing a ton of damage. And that's what Seth's plan is essentially going, I don't really want to trade here. I just want to be able to deal more damage because I'm going to be able to race much better than Kai is, even though Seth is at 7.
And by the looks of things here, it might be that Seth has drawn all 4 of his copies of History of Benalia.
He's a aficionado of Benalia's finest art and works.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes you got to know your history, give a bit of a lesson to your opponent. I mean, Kai's the one that's been around the Pro Tour for a while. He understands the history of the Pro Tour better than most, but right now he's just having to look on as all of these knights come into play on the other side of the table and represent a pretty big problem for him.
Yeah.
Thrashing Bronzodon, yes, it can deal with one enchantment at a time, but there are a lot of them at this point.
Yeah, and Kai is facing a lot of pressure. I mean, to be fair, Seth is at 7, so Seth can't keep taking damage forever. And Kai's going to have a really hard turn to navigate. Drawing the land, Vivian Reed is an option, but it seems like Kai might be going for something like Thrashing Bronzodon plus cast down, and not using the Bronzodon to sacrifice it, and then block with these Merfolk Branchwalkers and get a foothold on this board once again.
Yeah, all sorts of different options available. Kai sending his creatures in, forcing some decisions here for Seth, who's on 7 life.
Yeah, deciding I might as well attack since Seth is going to be forced to block. Maybe not this turn, but the next one. And that Line of Realms is pretty innocent. It does produce. It does look like it just produces mana. But if Seth goes to 1, then then at that point, Seth has to have at least as many creatures as Kai does at every point, and maybe 1 or 2 more just in case of a top deck removal spell. So Seth here considering the block, because the crackback would be for 12 damage with this trio of knights. So Seth here, while still in, I believe, in an advantageous position, has a really tough decision here on how to take over this game and lock it down.
Yeah, Seth, you see here, pausing for thought. Plenty of cards in hand to work with. The fact that he's not got too many lands in play thus far hasn't seemed like too big a deal because he's been playing a powerful threat each and every turn. But yeah, his life total dropping very low indeed here as he elects to not block there. Goes to 1 life.
Yeah. Right now, Kai would like a Vicious Rumors, a card that obviously no one would play in the main deck of his standard deck right now. But yeah, the Golgari deck just doesn't have reach. There's not a way to deal that last point of life. So once that's the case, Seth is like, okay, well, you need to attack for that. You don't have a flyer, so next turn I'm just going to play a history, and this turn I get to swing in for 12, get another knight from the History of Benalia in Seth's hand, and force Kai into a really difficult position. From now on, however, Seth is going to be forced to block any of Kai's threats, but deciding, you know what, I'm going to have to do that eventually anyways, so I'd rather just be able to deal damage in the process.
So Thrashing Bronzodon comes down, 2 mana available for Kai, so that cast down is live. The timing of it will mean that he can also potentially get a block in with the Land Morels before tapping it for mana here.
Yeah. Seth would really like something like a Forest or Sunpetal Grove in order to play History of Benalia plus Land Morels, but Temple Garden at 1 life, well, it's fine. It's still a land, but obviously a tap land.
Yeah, might as well be a Selazna Guildgate for the situation he finds himself in here.
Yeah, and here, yeah, you've kind of seen Seth's plan. Seth's plan was, okay, I'm fine with taking damage again, lack of reach, because I can swing back for a lot of damage. By the way, I love the fact that we finally got the kind of Stained Glass Knight token that goes so well with History of Benalia. One of the best tokens arts I've ever seen, actually.
There's been a lot of good tokens over the years, but these Knight tokens, they don't come along in just 1s and 2s too often in this matchup. It seems like these History of Benalias all like hanging out together. There is our Stained Glass Knight. It's got Vigilance. It's a 2/2 just like any other, but wow, that artwork, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Coming back to, I guess, the strategy of the match, this is a really tough spot for Kai. Kai is at 14, so Kai can easily take a few hits and has to consider the merits of blocking here. Kai can go, well, maybe my line is, do I just block and then use Thrashing Bronzodon's ability to get rid of history? It's not the best value exchange, but it might allow me to take over the game. The problem is, I don't really have a creature, and Vivian Reed is not exactly going to be the best card against this. Vivian Reed could minus to, I believe there's a Baffling End in play, played a couple of turns earlier, so Vivian Reed could minus to kill the Baffling End. So Kai going cast down on a knight, probably taking 8 damage here, and then I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like Vivian minus on one of these enchantments. Kai will just have to choose the enchantment. But I think once Kai sees the 4th history of Benalia hit the table, that enchantment is very likely going to be one of these histories. It may even be the history at 2, just so Kai has a damage reprieve.
Yeah, I mean, it's the turn that it ultimates, if you will, it gets to the 3rd act. Definitely a scary one, and Seth has managed to chain together a bunch of scary turns in that regard. But Seth actually going for Baffling End here to deal with that Thrashing Bronzestone while the shield's somewhat down here.
Yeah, deciding that there's not really much of a point in making another Knight token here. Kai at 6. Seth can easily take a turn here. Already 2, the Knights would trade into the Merfolk Branchwalkers anyways. And Kai has a really tough turn here. There's a few options. Vivian Plus is not really one, since Kai would essentially be forced to block 2 Knight tokens, but it seems like Seth would have lethal damage by going Vivian Plus, so that's unlikely to happen. The other option is Vivian Minus, so killing a Baffling End to get a free. That would trade for 3 of the Knight tokens and leave Seth with just the Llanowar Elf. So that might be Kai's line. Kai's other line is to attack, forcing this semi-abyss mode where there has to be a trade. Seth at 1 has no choice. And then Kai going Vivian Reed, destroying Baffling End, and potentially taking over as a result.
Yeah, get back a Bronzedon.
But Seth, with Vivian at 2, Seth won't be able to will be able to deploy Lyra and not fall into an obvious trap. Chupacabra could be a problem, but Kai doesn't have a second black source. And Seth may believe that the card in hand for Kai could be a Chupacabra, but may decide to go for this Lyra anyways.
Sorry, of course, not getting back a Thrashing Bronzestone at all. When Baffling End goes away, the baffling bit is that there's a dinosaur comes along.
Yep.
So that's exactly what Kai has there.
It's basically the dinosaur looking at the hole and going like, what happened here?
Fair enough.
Yep. But yeah, here, still a lot of power in hand for Seth. So Seth could go... Seth really wants to get rid of this Vivian Reed. Unfortunately, the dinosaur in front can't be answered by any of Seth's cards, so that's not an option. So Vivian Reed is going to untap for Kai, which means that Seth may go for a Lyra here. Whoa. This is an interesting attack. Oh, right, the Knight from the history popped up. So yeah, obviously the Knight would have much less value, so Seth decides to trade it in here for the dinosaur in order to, because it's a free, so might as well get that traded in now. And Kai happy to oblige, since much better to keep a Vivian Reed.
Budde with the Jade Light Ranger, that will help smooth out his draws a reasonable amount here in this next turn. And Seth, he is in this spot where he needs to keep getting creatures in play now on just 1 life.
Yeah, and now the game has gotten very close. The life totals are very low. So that Llanowar Elf on Kai's side is actually lethal. And yeah, Seth here going, you know what? I'm going to believe that you don't have a Black Source or a Chupacabra. If Seth gets to untap with this Lyra, probably Seth wins. If Seth, obviously, if the Lyra dies, that would have been the end of the game.
Lyra Dawnbringer, one of those cards that makes it very, very straightforward to win games, given a little bit of time so you can get some attacks in. Vivian Reed here plays the plus ability.
Ravenous Chupacabra, but no access to a second Black Source here for Kai.
We've seen this a couple of times from these Golgari lists, that they've had the spells that they need, but not quite the mana that they've been able to put together to make everything work out.
Right, and that's one of the problems of playing Llanowar Elves. You need a large amount of untapped green sources on turn 1. So that, right, so you see Kai's here deciding to take that second Black Source that will allow Kai to play the Carnage Tyrant that was just drawn this turn. And this Trample Hexproof threat might be good enough to end the game. Between Vivian Reed meaning that Lyra kind of has to attack here. But Seth, drawing a land for a Carnage Tyrant would be big for Seth here, since gaining 5+ being able to trade the Carnage Tyrant would put the advantage back in Seth's favor.
Lyra has to take down Vivian Reed, because Vivian Reed's 3rd point of loyalty would be enough to shoot a flyer out of the air.
Yep, and with that land, Seth is going to be able to deploy the Carnage Tyrant. And we're back to kind of an equal game, except Seth has Lyra, Dawnbringer.
So equal, but for that gigantic legendary angel that gains you lots of life, flies over, attacks everything, and potentially just closes the game.
What a draw from Kai Budde. That's Vraska Relic Seeker.
All right. Now we have a game on our hands.
Kai's going to attack. Seth is forced to block. Vraska Relic Seeker is going to destroy this Liar Dawnbringer. And Kai is going to come back roaring in this game.
My goodness me. And Vraska Relic Seeker, of course, destroys Lyra, but also there's a Planeswalker on the battlefield that is still active. This is a gigantic situation for Kai Budde here. He's in a rough matchup. He has had a tough game. This is probably the only point in the match where he's had an advantage, but you know what? It might be enough, at least for now, for him to force a game 3 here. He has the Planeswalker in play. He's going to be able to make it very difficult for Seth Manfield to present enough blockers if he can keep that Planeswalker around.
Yeah, and these Pirates are going to be, I mean, right now they're both playing with kind of shoestrings, you know. Tocatli Honor Guard is pretty good and will still stop and prevent a top deck from Kai, say Ravenous Chupacabra, or making sure those Explorer creatures are very valueless creatures. But, and with the history, Seth will have the immediate board presence, but this Vraska Relic Seeker is going to keep ticking up and up. And wow, is this Seth deciding to attack Kai Budde's life total?
Goes for Tocatli Honor Guard and Histra Benalia. That the 4th copy of Histra Benalia. He's been holding on to that for a few turns now. Hasn't been able to really get the maximum value out of it. And each and every draw step here, you see Kai kind of just rubbing that top card of the deck on the table for a little bit of extra luck there. Team Good Luck High Five, needing all the luck it can get. And Landwar Elves +5 lands means that he can cast this Carnage Tyrant. I believe that's what he just drew there.
No, it has a similar grand outlook because of the light in the top left-hand corner, but I believe that might be a Druid of the Cowl here. Not quite as powerful, unfortunately.
Sadly not, but...
And the best 2/1 for free mana.
Going wide, though, and with the life totals what they are, if you can get wide enough, that might be good enough, but this History of Benalia makes it difficult to keep lots of creatures going around the edges. But Manfield with just lands in hand now. He had a long, long stretch of having a lot of spells, not very many lands. He's now getting back to evens on land, but that might mean that he's in a tough spot here.
Yeah, and this has gotten very much in Kai's favor. Now let's look at the board. Kai could decide to answer this history with the Vraska, which is an option. Then the Knights would not really have good attacks. They would just trade with the 2/2 and the 2/1 on Kai's side. Kai could go, you know what? If there's 4 frees, that's not so bad. I can... I could take 4 damage here. Essentially, Kai taking 4 damage here would be fine with Kai at 5, so he could decide to take one of those Knights. And yeah, you can see this Pirate coming out here. I think this is the right line of play. Just keep developing the board. There's no need to minus Vraska. Wow, and Seth deciding to scoop them up here in the face of some menacing Pirates.
All right, so 14 minutes left on the clock, and you heard Seth there just double-checking the time that was available, because I think that part of that scoop was him recognizing that the things had turned around a little bit, and he wants to make sure that he can successfully get through a game 3, because ultimately his deck, it feels like it's kind of favored against this Golgari list. And in some respects, better off to give himself the full opportunity to win in Game 3.
Yeah, so Seth basically saw there that with a Vraska Relic Seeker at 7 loyalty, Kai could essentially minus free it. And that's why you saw Kai make a Pirate token. It was also to make sure that Kai could deal with any top deck on Seth's side.
Yeah, there's one match on our back table also going on, but we'll be sticking very much with this Hall of Fame matchup once they get back going to things. We're going to get a little bit of a look at Gregor Kowalski and Logan Nettles before then, though, in part because we've got some slightly different lists here. Kowalski, he is on red-white aggro, initially kind of the white half of that deck. If we're honest, it's kind of more than half, really. On the other side of things, though, Nettles is on Dimir control. So he's got blue and black in his arsenal, and he will be aiming at trying to hit the mid and late game, using plenty of removal and potentially getting card advantage by killing a whole bunch of creatures all in one go.
Yeah, and I love Logan's main deck. Logan Nettles' main deck has free Disinformation Campaign. Probably not a card for this matchup. And here you see one of the key cards from these white aggressive decks, a Johnny's Pridemate. This has been the kind of worst kept secret of the tournament, which we can finally see on camera. So, worst kept secret round 6. But a Johnny's Pridemate, a lot of these teams have been murmuring, this is the tech, this is what we need. That's why you've been seeing Leonin Vanguard. That's why you've been seeing Healer's Hawk. They combine with a Johnny Pride Mage to make a gigantic 2-drop threat. Again, similar to Tarmogoyf, a card you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. While things like Cast Down can cleanly deal with an Ajani's Pride Mate, there are plenty of matchups which are either relying on damage-based removal or they just don't have a clean way of dealing with an Ajani's Pride Mate once it's gained a few extra +1/+1 counters. Logan Nettles, though, it seemed like he had the memo on that one, able to kill off the Cat Warrior before it got too large. In the meantime, though, Kowalski is still able to get some good attacks in here, starting off mono-white before he finally gets that Clifftop Retreat on turn 4. And lo and behold, the enchantments that make creatures keep on coming for him. He already had Allegiance Landing, but now it's History of Benalia, taxing our feature match area on tokens, but for the insistence of Syncopate on the other side of things. Logan Nettles with some old school cards here, most of which appear to be signed thus far.
Yeah, and essentially, Logan is easily taking control of this game. It depends really on Logan's hand here. We're going to get a look at Kowalski's magnificent basics, where once the Duress misses. Duress, the card you board into these matchups, History of Benalia being one of the key reasons, but you can get something like a Pride of Conquerors or Nab, a wide range of sideboard cards, and Logan going for Duress plus Golden Demise to make sure that Kowalski's left with nothing.
Yeah, 2 lands in hand, living off the top of his deck from here on out.
What a top deck. Experimental Frenzy. One of the hardest cards for this blue-black deck to deal with. Logan tapped out and going to have to deal with a stream of cards from Kowalski.
From now on out, Gregor Kowalski, once he's got this Experimental Frenzy in play, he will be living off the top of his deck, but in a slightly more exciting fashion than we previously hoped for, because at any point he can look at the top of his deck. At any point he can play the top card from his deck, but the cards that he has in hand, they no longer matter. They will only become relevant if he chooses to pay 4 mana to get rid of his enchantment. But in the short term, this is the source of so much card advantage for Kowalski that it could be a big problem for Nettles, who's already on 12 life to Kowalski's 22.
And Kowalski deciding whether to play a land here or not, just in case there was a land on top or a 1-drop, and just looking at the sideboard to make the mathematical play here.
Yeah, and one of the ways that Experimental Frenzy can end up not working out is if you have land into land on top. That kind of stops the pace of the game a little bit. We can see that our front table is ready. We're going to just give Kowalski a turn or so to see quite how much he can piece together. He's found a pair of 1-drops, already getting the City's Blessing by the looks of things very, very quickly indeed here.
Yep. But you can just see how this frenzy works. Until Kowalski hits another land, this is going to be more and more spells. Okay, here's another 1-drop.
Admittedly a legendary one, so it comes into play, generates a vampire, and then kind of goes away again.
Yeah, one is protecting the other.
This protects this. Okay. That makes sense. It's fine. Yeah, we'll put that label in minutes. Don't worry.
All right. That was more like no pieces of paper, please. We'll remember it somewhere else.
Yeah, we'll keep it tidy in its own way. Enough mana for a History of Benalia.
Oh my, this Experimental Frenzy. You see why these decks want this card. It just allows you to explode when, you've got nothing left. You saw Kowalski's position. There were 2 lands. There was nothing. Rips Experimental Frenzy and takes over the game.
Yeah, Logan Nettles here. I mean, he played Golden Demise, and it felt pretty good. He left his opponent with absolutely nothing. And from nothing, Kowalski has got essentially everything. The 10th ranked player in the world, the finalist from the World Championship, just showing what he can do in this standard format. This is a man who plays a huge amount of Magic Online. He is very, very experienced when it comes to tournament level Magic right now. And while Nettles is certainly no slouch when it comes to the online game either, he's got a lot of work to do to get back in this game. He's going to have to hope that he can deal with enough threats to be able to stay in things as we get into the mid game here.
Yeah, but I think when you see Vraska's Contempt taking down a Knight token in this position, you know that Logan Nettles is in a heap of trouble. And I think Kowalski is going to easily take down this game and force a game free. As a result, purely almost of this Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah, Experimental Frenzy, one of those cards that allows you to do things that would almost be impossible for any other card in the entirety of Standard. We're going to need to jump back to our front table now. We don't want to leave 2 Hall of Famers waiting too terribly long, but trust me, if we get to a Game 3, which looks quite likely from this back table, then we will make sure to show you as much of that as we can. But we do have a Game 3 up front. It's going to be Seth Manfield and Kai Budde. On the face of things, matchup-wise, it feels like this one kind of does favour Seth, but You cannot count out the German Juggernaut, able to take game 2 against Manfield. And we'll find out whether or not he can get 2 on the bounce here as we get into our deciding game. Just a tap Temple Garden on turn 1 for Seth Manfield, and there is that Lamoirelles coming from Budde.
Yeah. Manfield on the play deciding to board in the Adanto Vanguards. Normally a card against control, and Seth likely did not board in these Vanguards on the draw, since, you know, they can be quite bad against Golgari midrange, not just because the card itself can get stopped. It's more when you decide to attack, you don't have enough additional pressure. But on the play, it can really get there.
Kai here making the most of the Lamoirelles, getting him to find the additional land off Merfolk Branchwalker there.
Yeah. But yeah, I like the transformation. It's not many cards. It's probably a difference of 4 cards. But Seth has a different plan on the draw and on the play with this Celestian midrange deck, understanding the different plans that can take down the Golgari midrange deck.
Yeah, these players, a little over 10 minutes left on the round. They get a little bit of bonus time because we were just holding their match briefly while we looked in on what was going on our back table. Cast down an option here that's revealed by Jade Light Ranger.
Yeah, and Kai's hand is pretty full of power, so Kai probably decided to get rid of the cast down since already having access to 1 in hand, but keeps the Contempt, just does not want to lose to either Elia Dawnbringer, well, although Vivian Reed would be a very easy answer to that card, or Karn, Sign of Urza, or Vivian Reed itself on the other side for Seth.
Yeah, a lot of threats that Seth can deploy that are pretty potent, as it turns out, in this matchup.
Or that Adanto Vanguard. Actually, now that I think about it, you know, that Vraska's Contempt, one of the few ways for Kai to deal with that card.
Seth here generating value wherever he goes, forcing expensive removal spells on the Adanto Vanguard. Hard to cleanly 1-for-1 against this History of Benalia. And in the early beatdown stages of things, he is a little bit ahead against Kai Budde. I mean, at the point that Seth was coming up in the game, Kai was just at the absolute pinnacle of things. This is a man with 7 Pro Tour wins. To put things into context, when you get past 7 Pro Tour wins, we drop back quite a few trophies.
What is it, 7 and then 3?
And one of the people with 3 is another Good Luck High Five member, being Dirk Babarowski, that got 2 trophies playing alongside Kai in Team Pro Tours.
All right. That sounds like a different era.
Very much so. Kai Budde from Germany, very, very hard worker and incredibly talented Magic player.
10 Pro Tour top 8, 7 Pro Tour wins, 7 wins, 63% on the Pro Tour, and this is past the prime.
Yeah, and now we have Vivian Reed coming down for Kai. He's got plenty going on here.
Ooh, I like this.
It cannot be said that the way that this game is going to be completed is because one player had a bad draw.
Right, and Kai deciding to take a really interesting line here, deploying the Vivian to get rid of History of Benalia. With the Vivian, a very easy target, but with History of Benalia going into its 3rd chapter, Seth might have to sing in a lot of attackers to kill Vivian Reed. So this is actually putting Seth in quite a difficult decision. Do you go after the Vivian Reed here? Or with Kai at 12, do you just go for the Frode and put all 4 of these creatures towards Kai? And that's why you see Kai minusing to kill, getting rid of the History of Benalia, as Kai understands, well, Seth's plan is probably going to be to attack me. So this Vivian Reed is relatively safe, since Seth is not in a position to split these attacks. If Seth splits the attacks, then Kai can easily decide how to manage it. One thing Kai, with this split though is interesting. Seth sending a Adanto Vanguard to Vivian Reed and the rest to Kai. Kai is definitely forced to trade in this Jade Light Ranger for a Knight. And then the Merfolk Branchwalker can either decide to throw itself in front of the Adanto Vanguard in order to give the Vivian Reed a 2nd life, or decide to print 4 damage, or stick around for a bit.
So something that Seth has done here is given Kai options, and that potentially, in many cases, a pretty dangerous line of attack. As things stand, Kai does have the opportunity to keep Vivian Reed alive here. Seth has to pay a few points of life to give his Adanto Vanguard indestructibility, and after all of these blocks, Kai's taken a reasonable chunk and lost a few creatures, but he does still have his Planeswalker around.
Yeah, and again, in these matchups, life totals are a card advantage resource. With Kai basically going for the same rationale that Seth did, well, you don't have reach. You still need to attack me to win. So decide, you know what? I can take this damage here and try to redeploy. Hoping that this Vivian Reed yields something of quite powerful, something like a Ravenous Chupacabra, or even a cheap creature, even something as innocuous as a Llanowar Elves, backed up by a Vraska's Contempt might be enough. The Llanowar Elves can block the Adento Vanguard, forcing Seth to pay some life. The Vraska's Contempt can deal with a Knight, as unappealing as that sounds.
Ultimately, though, Kai recognizing that what he really needed there was an additional land to be able to cast 2 spells this turn. The casting cost in his hand not lining up super well, but now he has the opportunity to use Vraska's Contempt and cast down this turn in order to make what looks like a very lopsided board in Seth's favor not quite as one-sided.
Right, and the interesting angle here is where are these removal spells pointed? Seth is stuck on 4 mana, and with Vivian Reed at 3 loyalty, Kai can decide to be okay with a Lyra Dawnbringer here, since Vivian Reed would be able to trade for that, but a Johnny Adversary of Tyrants able to put these. Let's see. We're definitely plussing here, but where is interesting? Seth kind of has to put Kai on Vraska's Contempt. So by making every creature have free power, Seth essentially is going, you have to block a creature and remove one. So that would make the Llanowar Elves at least go away as well.
Heads up play here from Seth Manfield. Clearly familiar with this matchup, familiar with what he needs to do to put Budde under the most pressure here. A little under 5 minutes left on this round. This is our game 3. These players looking to be at 4-2 after this round ideally, and some big swings coming in here from the #1 ranked player in the world, Seth Manfield.
Yeah, and Seth deciding to go after Vivian Reed, understanding that if Kai is very likely here to have a removal spell with the number of cards in hand or the play pattern. So Seth is going, dealing free damage to Kai is all well and good, but honestly, I'd rather Kai at 4 and Vivian Reed gone than Kai at 1 and Vivian Reed still around. And again, that shows you how board-centric this matchup is. It's not really about life totals, it's about the board.
So Kai here electing to just let Vivian Reed go. He's got plenty of mana to work with, so we're going to see some spells at the end of turn here. First up, Vraska's Contempt. Deal with that Ajani before it can do any more damage. Also a cast down just to keep this board just a little bit clearer. Kai also, of course, gaining a little bit of life off Vraska's Contempt there. Potentially kind of relevant.
Yeah, and Kai now can retake over the board with these with these J-Light Rangers, but Vraska Relic Seeker, a really key card. With Kai's current hand having another creature to deploy this turn, plus a Vraska's Contempt, this Vraska Relic Seeker can potentially really take over the game. Kai's just considering here that this Llanowar Elves does have to survive, and Seth has shown Baffling End, so Kai deciding to remove the Vraska Relic Seeker here, deciding that Vivian Reed and cheap removal is what Kai wants to go for here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that it's just a matter of being able to cast multiple spells in a turn so that you don't get caught out by a single removal spell dealing with the big threat. Lots of exploring going on for Budde here. He's got blockers. He's got spells for future turns.
Kai made this play most likely because he believed he was ahead. It seems weird to say if he was ahead because he's basically like, what could go wrong? I keep Vraska Relic Seeker on top, and Seth deploys a Baffling End on this Llanowar Elves, and I might fall behind. So that's why Kai decided to get rid of the Vraska Relic Seeker, is Kai feels advantage in this game. And again, the life totals here not telling the full story.
Khan Sayonavers are coming down for Seth Manfield here, who has to go digging. Sees 2 lands on top, and 2 lands on top actually completely fine by him. He ultimately really does need to be able to cast some of the bigger spells that he's got in hand. Couple of copies of Vivian Reed, Lyra Dawnbringer that can mean that his life total becomes unassailable, but there's also just 2 minutes left on the clock. If he can get Lyra into play and gain some life, it means that the chances of Kai being able to get things going very, very tough here. He's already killed off a Vivian Reed, so that's one less that he believes that he has to worry about. This is going to be a photo finish here as we get into the last minutes of this round 6.
I want to take a moment to appreciate Kai giving Temple Garden over Forest here. Like, if you thought that Seth didn't have a one, like, you would give Seth the Forest in almost every occasion except where you believe Seth has a Llanowar Elf. And Kai heads up when, yep, you have Llanowar Elves, I want you to take 2 damage here. That may not look like much, but that was incredible to me.
Big swing coming in here from the Jade Light Ranger. Kai trying to make sure that these life totals both tumbling down at a reasonably even pace. And now we figure out what the follow-up's going to be. In terms of what's going on here, it's a similar sort of deal. He can either cast one big spell in Vivian Reed or Vraska's Contempt and a cast down. And both of these options kind of interesting. Given that there's a Planeswalker in play on the other side, definitely a temptation to deal with the big things there. But no, decides to keep a little bit of removal left over for whatever it is that Seth might be working towards with all those cards in hand.
Yeah, and Seth drawing that card was a big way for allowed Seth to come back in this game. Kai here kind of forced to use the Vraska's Contempt on the card, but now with the life total so low, this Adanto Vanguard might become a liability. If Seth attacks here, and Jadelight Ranger is a lethal threat, so that makes this Adanto Vanguard not really an offensive threat. Since Seth's attack into Llanowar Elves would essentially mean that Seth is kind of forced to pay 4 life and then might open himself up to the Vanguard dying to removal spell or falling behind on the board. So the Adanto Vanguard maybe has this... It's kind of awkward because it could stay back, but it's so bad at defense, it kind of just has to attack. And Seth may just say, yep, I'm okay with this trade.
Okay, so time has just been called. This is turn 0. From here on out, there will only be 5 turns. 3 of those turns will be for Kai to attack with, the other 2 for Seth. Realistically, either one of these players still capable of taking this game.
Yeah, the game is really close, but now with time call, Seth has got to have to consider whether to keep this Vanguard or not, but it's very dangerous to keep it against something like that Jade Light Ranger, since Seth tapping out for something like the Lyra Dawnbringer in hand would mean that a single removal spell on the Lyra would be game. So that's why we see Seth not paying 4 life. It's just not something that's possible. I love, though, this heads-up play of making a token rather than trying to get more cards out of Karn. A 1/1 body, so relevant right now.
The 1/1 construct potentially can get bigger if there are more constructs coming from Seth in future turns. Kai here, he sees Lyra, but he also sees that small creature. And the small creature, in some respects, a bit more frustrating because while Lyra can cleanly be dealt with by Vivian Reed, the artifact creature, double creature in a single turn could be kind of a problem.
Yeah, and it was interesting that Kai decided not to deploy the Vraska's Contempt on Karn's Sign of Urza that turn with turns being called. Kai doesn't have, there's not going to be enough time, literally. There's only going to be 3 turns. And Kai's kind of in a 1 spell per turn mode. This Lyra has to go. I don't think Kai can really win the game with this Kai in play. With the Lyra in play. So the Vivian Reed or the Vraska's Contempt are going to be the options for the turn. And the question is, which one do you want to trade? Vivian Reed being at 2 with the J-Light Ranger staying back would technically allow the Vivian Reed to survive. But Kai wants to win this match of Magic. And to win this match of Magic, you're going to have to attack. You have 3 attacks. J-Light Ranger can easily get blocked. And if Kai decides to stay back, it's going to be really hard for Kai to take down the game. Although it would be the correct play given infinite time, since then you can block one of these creatures. Although, again, just going, you know what? I need to get rid of this Karn and deal some form of pressure. So here, Seth has to decide, do I want to essentially trade this Karn for Vivian Reed, but that means another attack step with these creatures tapped out? Or do I just want this construct to go in the way and Karn to survive? But then the Vivian Reed stays in play.
Yeah, this is a tough situation for Seth Manfield to navigate his way through. Let's have a look at the cards that he's got in hand. Maybe this will help us figure out exactly what he's potentially going to be working with. He's got 2 Vivian Reeds that don't really have great targets, and a Llanowar Elves that, yes, it's another threat, but it's not exactly the scariest of threats.
Yeah, and Seth deciding to let the Karn go. And with time being called and not much pressure, Seth may decide the other thing. Oh, wait.
Is there a Karn to make another construct so you got a 2/2 token?
This might be why Seth decided to leave the Karn go, is realizing Kai's at 3. Top decking a Karn here would have been lethal. And there's maybe, 1 or 2 other cards that would have meant that an extra creature may have been lethal damage. And Kai had 1 life with 3 creatures would be good enough. So Seth decided to let the Karn go and try to go for the win by drawing a playable spell this turn. But Vivian Reed is not going to be the answer here.
The life total's 8-1 now. And on 1 life, Lamore Elves is an exciting threat.
Yeah. It's got Vraska's emblem, essentially. But Kai has Vraska's Contempt. So now that Kai has untapped, Kai can't really lose this game. So we're going to be down to basically, can Kai win this game? And unfortunately, that Fine Finality is not a card you can take with Vivian Reed. That would have been quite the top deck. Top decking Fine Finality and then getting a land off Vivian Reed would have been lethal for Kai over 2 turns. But unfortunately here, it looks like we're heading towards a draw in what has been really quite a tight game.
Yeah, some excellent magic on both sides here. These players navigating unusual draws and then kind of an unusual matchup in many respects. Seth Manfield, on paper, his deck looking like it ought to be a firm favorite here, but Budde just keeping him in lockstep the entirety of this match, winning game 2, forcing a game 3, and this game 3 being very close indeed.
Yeah, and now Kai has to decide what to do. I kind of like keeping up this Vraska's Contempt since it gains life. Wait, one of the lines Kai's can go for lethal here would have been to Contempt the Lamore Elves, swing in, and hope that Seth essentially doesn't draw damage. And wow, Kai deciding to just attack here to kind of tap out Seth's creatures. This is a really exciting life for Kai. Kai went, I don't want to Vraska's Contempt this Lamore Elf because I want to incentivize Seth to attack here. So will Seth take the bait here? Will Seth run into this Vraska's Contempt or not? Because if Seth does, then Kai may be able to take this one down.
Yeah, this a really interesting mind game. So you guys know what's going on. If it works out that Seth attacks with all of his creatures here, Vraska's Contempt kills the construct, gains 2 life for Budde, meaning he's on 3, he takes 2 off those Lamore Elves, survives at 1, and he can swing back on the final turn of the game for exactly the damage that he needs to win the game. Now, if Seth chooses to attack with a different number of creatures, Kai still can't lose because of that Vraska's Contempt, but equally, Seth cannot win.
Right, and Seth has to basically go, look, this is what Kai's representing. Kai's representing Vraska's Contempt. There's 0 question about that from Seth's side. Seth's question is, okay, well, that's the representation. Do I just go for it or not? Is Kai bluffing or does Kai have it? Because Seth could decide to go, you know what? I'm going to take the drop. I'm going to pass. You're not going to have it away. Seth decided to go for it with 2 attackers here. So now Kai, essentially Vraska's, this is the same as attacking with all 3 creatures. Since Kai can decide to exile the blocker going up to free. And with Sunfellow Grove, Seth is going to have to go Vivian Reed plus, hope to hit a 1-drop, and for Kai to not have a removal spell for that 1-drop in order to draw this match.
Such an interesting turn there. Let's see how this Vivian Reed goes. Dig, dig, dig. It's not looking too hopeful. And there's the handshake. Kai Budde just proving the quality that it takes to be a 7-time Pro Tour winner. Just a spectacular game of Magic there from the member of Team Good Luck High Five. Kai Budde against the newly enshrined Hall of Famer. That one, a truly spectacular match. But you know what, Eduardo, we get some more Magic. That's how good this round is going for us. Round 6 here of Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. We're going to get a chance to see a little bit more of Gregor Kowalski against Logan Nettles, because on the back table, that one also still going. And we can see here that, wow, there's a Thief of Sanity on one side of the battlefield, but there's Experimental Frenzy, a lot of lands, and a lot of threats on the other side of things. This looks like a very familiar situation, but now it's 1-1, and Gregor Kowalski, he just needs to find a way of converting in the final stages here. These guys still have some time on the clock because we were holding them to some extent to try and bring you a little bit more Magic. This is, wow, this is a big, big situation that Logan Nettles finds himself in here.
Yeah, but Kowalski, Experimental Frenzy. I mean, Kowalski's shuffling those cards in hand, which I find kind of cute with an Experimental Frenzy in play. There is the option to kill it, but Here, the board for Kowalski is so good, and these blue-black decks, unlike the Jeskai decks with Deathling Clarion and sometimes Stellar Wreckage and sometimes Cleansing Nova, can't really deal with this easily with a wide board.
Yeah, I mean, Golden Demise looks all right here, but it's not going to take too much life gain for that Ajani's Pridemate to grow out of it. And this is the disaster draw for Experimental Frenzy. Aside from lots of lands on top, finding a 4-mana spell in another Experimental Frenzy kind of about as bad as it gets.
Yeah, it's just a 4-mana drawback, but sometimes you just cast it anyways. Here, though, it depends when these spells were casted. It looks like it was pre-combat. That Adento Vanguard looks like it was already in play. So Kowalski here likely to try to go for a lethal attack. And
Ritual of Soot in hand, though.
And Dream Eater.
There's a lot of cards here that Logan Nettles has in order to square this game off.
I think with the Dream Eater, Logan Nettles has a chance to maybe end the Ritual. I think just one of these cards would not have been sufficient, but the combination of Dream Eater and Ritual of Soot means that Logan Nettles can maybe take over this game. Unfortunately, the Ritual would kill the Thief of Sanity. So here we see this Dream Eater, most likely Surveil 4. And likely bouncing this Adento Vanguard, and we're going to see this Dream Eater blocking Ajani's Pridemate with Logan Nettles going to 1 and being on the wire's edge.
As it turns out, round 6 of the Pro Tour is all about going to 1 and having some very exciting late games here as Dream Eater potentially gets Logan Nettles through the night here. The Nightmare Sphinx coming down exactly when needed to be able to keep his dreams alive, and Ritual of Soot following it as the follow-up will be a huge play.
Right. And Kowalski will you know what's the best part, though, of the Dream Eater? It's almost as close to a Vindicate effect as you can get. Again, Vindicate, destroy target permanent, because Experimental Frenzy means you can't cast the Adento Vanguard.
Very important point. Yeah, it's stuck in hand. 2 Experimental Frenzies in play. The amount of mana it would cost Gregor Kowalski to be able to play that Adento Vanguard now is truly colossal. And now we get the big block as well from the Flash creature.
Yeah, and Logan Nettles might find a way to turn this around. But at 1 life, Ritual of Soot will help. And there's an attacker too, but again, Experimental Frenzy is going to allow Kowalski next turn to redeploy. So I think Kowalski still has the advantage here, but it's not as big as it was. Wait, is this what? This looks like a Conclave Tribunal off the top. Well, I'm going to say off the top a lot because it's Experimental Frenzy. There's
Everything's off the top.
Yeah,
We'll allow
exactly. Still. And here, taking... Oh, wow. This is so good for Logan Nettles. If that was the Dream Eater taken, the Ritual of Soot would not have been able to do much. But since the Thief of Sanity was taken so that Kowalski wouldn't have to deal with that card advantage engine, you know, Dream Eater fundamentally just the creature. So Thief of Sanity potentially a lot of trouble, but had Kowalski seen the Ritual of Soot in Logan's hand, I mean, that would have been a different target, but that's how Magic's played. You don't have perfect information.
All right, so Logan Nettles now, it looks like an attack on a hiding to nothing here for the Dream Eater, just sort of getting the revenge nudge in, but Ritual of Soot here, destroying all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less. By my count, this works out rather nicely on the other side of things. Yes, a knight gets to hang around because of the bodyguard there, but if there's any kind of a follow-up here for Logan Nettles, then, well, lo and behold, it's a History of Benalia. That one got stolen by a Dream Eater, and it means that we do have a perfectly reasonable blocker for a knight in the form of another knight.
Right, and Logan attacking here, understanding that by staying back, Logan has almost no chance to win this game. Sorry. Banefire off the top.
That'll do it. You don't need to sink a ton of mana into it necessarily, but by making it at least X equals 5 or more, you can be completely certain that counter magic will not be enough. And it seems that, you know, Gregor Kowalski is just another day at the office. That's the reason he put it in his deck, so that he could play it. And it's amazing how it's easier to find Banefire off the top when you're casting all of the spells off the top with Experimental Frenzy, but a fitting end. Wow, we have had a spectacular round of Magic here. That was, well, quite something to see there. It's not very often that you see 2 Hall of Famers going toe-to-toe, representing different generations of Magic, taking it down to the very final point of life, the very final turn, and some very, very tight decision-making to decide it. And then you know what? Just for a little extra bit of bonus magic, some Bane Fires as well. This will be a round that I know I'm going to go back and watch again because I enjoyed it so much the first time round that why the heck not? But for now, let's head things back to our news desk as they can bring you all the details of everything else that's gone around in this action-packed round of Magic Round 6 here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the news desk. The three of us have been joined by the one of him who's been sitting here so long that Luis Salvato now actually lists the news desk Atlanta as his permanent place of residence. Luis, we're very sorry. It turns out that Seth Manfield and Budde, they wanted to play some Magic, they wanted to put on a show.
It was a good show.
But things that are worth the wait kind of play into what we're talking about here, Brian.
Yeah, we're here to celebrate Luis Salvato, our Player of the Year, historic, only the second time it's happened in Magic, a Player of the Year playoff. You had to wait a couple of months for the gratification, but finally it came. Luis, congratulations. We were all so excited to see it happen.
Okay.
So let's take a look at Luis's career here. 2 Pro Tour top 8s. You've got at least 1 Pro Tour top 16 in there as well.
I think it was Kaladesh, top 16, and in the trios we made top 8, but it was the trios. So
I remember talking to you at Pro Tour Kaladesh, actually. At that top 16, you had already had a Pro Tour top 8 in your career, but
Yes.
for you, that was the moment where you felt like you played well enough, you had a good enough deck, you did everything right, and it was a big moment
yes,
for you.
in Kaladesh I started the Pro Tour losing the draft 0-3, but then I won 10 in a row, so I come back and end up 12-4. So it was the following Pro Tour that Madrid for me, because I skipped 1.
Okay, but let's take a look at last year's Pro Tour season, if we can. We could pull up how you did on the Pro Tour and on the Grand Prix here.
Yeah,
And,
and obviously the highlight of the Pro Tour season, Rivals of Ixalan. At what point did you start thinking in that event that you could go on and win the whole thing?
No, pretty much never.
Okay.
So, I was expecting a good tournament, but never expect to win the whole tournament. So.
But you talk about that Pro Tour 25th anniversary top 8 finish, which is like a top 16 finish. That gives you that sense
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
maybe the Player of the Year, you're like, wait a minute.
The thing was, like, after that event, a friend of mine messaged me and say, Luis, the playoff race isn't over, and you are really close. You should play some GPs. So at that point in the hotel in Minneapolis, that night I started to think, okay, what should I do? Okay, yeah, I need to go. So I come back to Argentina for 3 days and then travel again for 50 days around the world, trying to reach Seth. And at one point, both of us were in Richmond, 8-0, day 1. But then in day 2, I lost a lot of matches and he top 8, and then semifinals, so he was far ahead. And then I say, okay, I need to go to Stockholm. I don't know if it's any other chance to be Player of the Year. This is so hard. So I book a ticket, and I went to Stockholm just to look for the top 8, and I did it. And well, the rest
It's incredible.
is
How much do you think your desire and the passion to be able to maybe tie him for Player of the Year and eventually win played into you doing so well at those tournaments?
Well, the thing, at that point, I thought, I don't know if any other moment in my life I will be so close to the Player of the Year. And if I can repeat this situation, it will be like because of multiple top 8 or winning another Pro Tour, so it will be insane. But at this point, I cannot planify that. So I need to take all the planes I need and go to everywhere. And I did it, and it's worth it.
How much do you feel, obviously Magic is a truly global game, but there are so many opportunities to play for Magic players here in the United States because there's a huge player base here. There are big tournaments you can play. You know, if you're on the East Coast, you can look at the West Coast and think, that's a long way away. Do I want a 3-hour plane ride, a 4-hour plane ride?
It's a 5-hour plane
Is it
ride.
5?
Don't exaggerate.
Well, okay, so basically it's all day. Do you feel that coming from where you do, that sense of the world of MTG is just natural to you? Because there aren't going to be that many Pro Tours within a 2-hour flight of your front door. So the idea of Stockholm versus Singapore versus Los Angeles just kind of feels just all part of the same global puzzle for you.
Yes, to me it's pretty much the same because every single place for travel from Argentina is like at least 2 planes, 12 hours, 18 hours. I'm used to. So if it's in Europe or in United States, it's pretty much the same. I love the thing to travel. As I said before, I didn't enjoy that much that weeks because it was like each week in a different place, a lot of planes and a lot of places, and I was in some moments alone because my friends
They're like, I'm not going to Stockholm.
yeah. At least I have friends in other parts in the world. So for example, I went to Denmark a few days to a friend's house, so I have a good time. But it's of course it's new for me, like travel around the world playing.
A tough question about the Grand Prix in Stockholm.
Yeah.
Of all the rushes, the excitement of getting to the playoff, you then have the match to go one stage further and not have to have a playoff. How much time have you spent looking back at that match and wondering whether you could have got it done there? Were there points in that match where you thought, I could already be player of the year? What is this playoff business?
Now, when I reached the top 8, I felt like super satisfied because I went for the top 8 and I did it. So that means everything to me at that point. So to be honest, I didn't care too much about lose that match. And I also felt like the deck was like tired at that point. The deck didn't want to play anymore.
Right, okay.
So the deck told to me, okay, we play in the Pro Tour, we did it well, we play here, it's enough. Now go to play the playoff. So, and also all the people say to me, I really want you become player of the year, but winning a playoff, because it's a great show that we want to see. So it's like the whole thing's conspiring to be in this way.
Luis, John Finkel, Kai Budde, Bob Maher, Kai Budde. Let's move on to the next
The greats
list
of
names.
Japan.
It's just the greats of Japan. You know, you have Shuhei Nakamura and, you know, Shota Yasuoka and Kenji Samura and all these names that are player of the year. And now your name is alongside of them as player of the year. Congratulations,
Thank you very much.
being enshrined in this very, very elite list of Magic players who can say they were the best player in the game for that year.
And you know what? It just keeps on going because we have a reigning player of the year, but the next one is on the way. And for that, we need round 7. Let's look at the leaderboard here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. We are down to just round about 8 players who have perfect records at 6-0. It is exactly 8. They include Hall of Famers Shota Yasuoka, Willie Adel, and Makihita Mihara. Great Magic coming right around the corner. It just does not stop. Round 7 starts now.